Hey guys, this is Vishal from Uncharted FX, and I'm going to be doing my first weekly trading analysis for the week ahead. So I'm going to strive to do this every week. You'll see some of the charts and setups that I'm keeping an eye on, and especially you'll sort of get used to the type of charts that I look for. And again, trading is pretty much you want to find a niche and you want to keep repeating these same patterns over and over again. So the reason why I do this on the weekend is essentially I want to prepare for the week ahead, so I'm not making too many thinking decisions when these trade setups are apparent on the week. I just want to execute them. There's not much thinking involved. All the analysis is done on the weekend, and I'm just reacting to these zones and these price levels that are breaking. So the first thing that I do is I'm going to, I use FX Street, but you can use any other economic calendar, you know, baby pips, a few other pip charts, a whole bunch of other Forex sites that have their own calendar. But basically what I do is I look to see if there's going to be any major event news for the week ahead. This way, if I'm in a trade and I'm holding that currency, if I don't feel comfortable with that big news event coming up, I'll probably close the position, just because it's, you know, some randomness and risk that I can't really tolerate. Generally, the things I'm looking for are obviously big interest rate decisions and employment data. CPI and inflation data is getting important due to what central banks are doing, and especially American data. So you can see here, and oh, by the way, so what I do is I actually have a physical calendar here in my trading office, and I just write down basically these major events. So you can see here Tuesday, Monday, nothing really much happening. Tuesday we have some harmonized CPI out of Germany. We have the British unemployment rate. We have an economic survey, which is interesting just to note. Preliminary, I don't really put too much attention on, but we do have US retail sales, and we also have Canadian consumer CPI, so inflation data, which is quite important. And also Thursday we do have Australian employment data, which of course is always important. So, you know, it's nice to take a look at these numbers, essentially what we are, what the consensus is and what is actual. So, you know, just a way to see what the market and market participants are expecting. Again, generally the interest rate decisions and yeah, employment data, they warrant a lot of attention. But this is how I look at what news data are coming. It's relatively it's relatively a quiet week this upcoming week, not that bad. We've had much more crazier weeks. So just get this out of the way, see what's coming up, just so you know, okay, you know what, maybe there is a Fed day or whatever. So on to the markets. The first thing I do is I look at the weekly charts. So I have a whole bunch of instruments here. I don't trade everything, but I do look at them for my analysis. And essentially what I'm looking for is I'm looking for a good trending market. So something trending as in this. So it has its higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, a nice trend up. I would call myself more of a reversal trader or an early trend reversal trader. So essentially, in my opinion, there's three ways markets move: an uptrend, range, or a downtrend. And within these moves, there are these higher lows, higher highs, which I call waves. So there's waves in an uptrend, there's a range, and then there's a downtrend, which also has waves. And these waves are what I call swing points. But that could be for a different day. So essentially, let's look at some of the equity markets here. Again, you know, we have here what we'd call an evening star pattern if you're into the whole candle chart and candle chart patterns, candlestick patterns, sorry. Of course, you know, we talked about how the US equities were breaking into new highs. The Nasdaq, you know, has already made the breakouts. And last week was crazy because, you know, it was the whole US-China trade deal talks, the whole tariffs, etc., etc. So the market is still digesting this material. So for some equity pairs and also for some yen pairs, there actually are two ways to play them. Like on the long-term charts, on the weekly, daily charts, it looks like some of these can actually continue a bit lower, while on the 4-hour or the 2-hour charts, there is a case that we can see some sort of retracement. So what we'll do is we'll look at them individually, and we'll talk about what we can potentially see coming. So for the S&P, again, you know, weekly charts, I'll do a rundown, and I try to look for nice trends, right? So for example here, something like this, this is what I would want to see, you know, something like this, and telling me, okay, you know what, we've had a downtrend with nice waves, and okay, you know, if we had this break here above a swing high, we could be potentially, well, we've nullified the downtrend. Now we're expecting an uptrend. So weekly, I don't really trade off weekly charts. I'm just using them just to sort of see me, tell me where we are in terms of waves and where we are in trends, etc. So back to the S&P. So again, this is what I mean by there's two sort of opportunities here. On the 4-hour, a lot of traders were watching this zone here, which was the 2890, let's call it, zone, where we did break, and you know, this is why we wait for nice breaks here. So this would have been our entry into the trade, this candle here. Our stops would have been above the previous high here, and we had a nice move down, and now we're coming back to retest this zone. So for the next couple of days, or maybe even Monday, we'll sort of find out where this market wants to go. What I'm waiting for is if we do break above these swings here, then I can easily see this market continuing higher. However, if we do stall here for a bit, I want to see a nice bearish candle here. Just because we have a big a big green candle here, it would have to sort of close maybe 3/4 of the way, or ideally the safest way, more conservative way, is just to wait for a close to confirm a lower low, and then, you know, you're gonna continue lower to other zones. So a lot of the equities are like this. The Nasdaq is similar pattern here. The Dow Jones is also a bit, it's also similar here. So for, I mean, the Dow Jones, I'd probably be looking at these swings here. So it's going to be interesting just to see how these markets react on, say, Monday. Again, put your attention to this. On Friday, we were down like around 400 points, and we reversed it all and went above previous open, the previous open. So you know, just looking at charts like that, just understanding the psychology, think of it as a war, the sellers and the buyers. The buyers have won that battle on Friday, so now we're at this big zone. Let's see what happens on Monday. Personally, I'm not really going to be trading too much of the equities until perhaps I see this break here. Again, you know, you can see your lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. If we do break that swing here, then it's telling me that we're likely going to start a new uptrend. Some would argue that this is actually a swing here as well, because we did create a lower low here. It's really up to you how conservative you are, how much risk you want to take. If you're really eager, you could be taking a buy now and putting your maybe stop loss 3/4 of the candle. Ideally though, I'd probably wait to see if we break above here. So again, that's pretty much all the equity markets. The Chinese 50 is a bit different. Well, not really a bit different, but we've had this lower high and we potentially have created our first higher low here. But again, this is not confirmed until we actually create a higher high. So this could be showing potential of a reversal, and it did bounce off at a very important previous support zone. Not really a flip zone. Yes, it has been a flip zone, but a good support zone here. So a lot of the European equities look a bit more bearish, and I'll show you on the long-term charts. But of course, they also do show some nice upside potential moves on the lower time frame. So the pound or the FTSE was our trade, well, pretty much my trade, one of my trades of the week for last week. This was the zone that I talked about in my blog post last week. We did break that, and where we are now. So again, this is sort of a nice type of discussion or a nice chart we can talk about regarding market theory. Nice uptrend, range, downtrend. So those are the only three ways markets move, and we have them all on display here. So what I like here is, it's probably better here on the 2 hour, but we have had a nice downtrend, and now we've begun to bottom at this zone, at the 72, let's call it 7200 zone. So what I'm waiting for is to see a break above this 72, let's call it 80 zone. So I want to see a close above here, not just a candle break, but also a close. So again, that's what I'm watching, and we could possibly see a nice move back up to 7400 here. Again though, on the daily, the charts show a different story. So this is what I mean for a lot of these European equities, and well, for the American equities too. We've had our nice uptrend on the daily charts, and we've created our first break. So this could be our first lower high here. Generally, we expect more than 2 lower highs. So the FTSE can actually possibly still move up and then continue lower. So that's what I'm looking for. Again, take these trades on that time frame. So if you're taking it on the daily, follow the daily chart, etc., etc. And if we do see that retest, we could possibly come down to, let's say, 70 here. So a lot of these daily chart equities look weak. See here it goes. So here's another good example. The CAC 40. This was also a trade actually I took last week on the break here. But again, you can sort of see here, after we got the break, we followed it with a couple of more waves. So lower highs here. And now basically you can see that on the daily, I had this area marked. So this was the swing that I was using. It's been sort of a flip zone. We can even extend it a bit there. So essentially what I'm watching is to see if we do close back above this. Ideally, we'd want to see a retest here before making well, technically this would be our first lower high actually, because we haven't made a lower high here on the French 40 before continuing lower. So that's a possibility for the long term. Of course, as I mentioned, short term, I'm watching this area, which is also a swing area here. If we do see a break here, we'll probably be testing zones higher. So the interesting thing about the French 40 actually is it's, oh, okay, so no, it's not at all-time high. Sorry, my bad, but it's close to a cool high. A cool high, not a cool high, but a recent high. So I wanted to actually, I skipped the Russell here. So the Russell, if you follow my social media posts and blog posts, I do look at the Russell, which is the mid-cap American stocks. I use this as a gauge to tell me where stocks can go. Usually this is a leading indicator. So if I see the Russell moving up quite nicely, I expect further strength in the S&P and the NASDAQ. You can see here we did have that break, but that break was reversed. We are creating some long wicks here. So it'll be interesting just to see what happens. So I do follow the Russell, and again, you know, if you do look at it on the weekly or the daily, there is still some room to the upside, which means I can still see equities going up. Again, if you do follow my social media posts and my blog posts, you know why I think equities have to go higher. Central bank's mandate is to keep assets going higher, and we'll probably be seeing more highs. But again, let's wait and see. This week will be quite interesting due to markets digesting all this news. So that was the CAC. The Spanish markets, similar thing. A bit choppier here, but we want to see a lower high on the daily. We haven't seen that yet, so perhaps go up before we make a lower high and go down. So again, this is just basic market theory. That's how markets move. I keep my trading simple, and that's what I do. The Euro stocks, again, nice uptrend we've had here. And on the 4-hour, that's where I took the trade. We see a bit of a range before breaking down lower. We've had our multiple trends. So again, on the daily, this was the flip zone. So a flip zone is an area that has been support and resistance. So it's been an important area which we have retested, gone red, but we continue to move higher. So it'll be interesting to see what this market does. Again, if we do break above the swings here on the 4-hour, it's the same for all markets. This can go higher, or we might see some further weakness here in equities. Again, just be patient, and we'll play it as the charts tell us. And let's look here at so before we look at oil and gold, let's talk about the US dollar here. So I'm in the boat that the dollar is actually going much higher, and that's going to cause the problems in the world because debt in emerging markets and such are based in US dollars. And if you read my geopolitical post, you understand that the Russians and the Chinese are pretty much attempting to take down US dollar demand. The French called it exorbitant privilege, which they talked about. There's this artificial demand for US dollars, which allows the Americans to print dollars because it's warranted, because the demand is there and it grows. And also it means that the Americans can essentially, the American government can have large deficits without ever really thinking about paying them back. Of course, if the dollar demand takes a hit, there will be issues. So keep an eye out on that. As I said, though, before that all happens, as the dollar goes higher, we'll have more problems, right? So this is where you see the Turkish lira and the Indian rupee are getting decimated because of the high dollar. And this is why they're resorting to buying Iranian oil, because it's just too expensive for them to switch currency into American dollars and then buy oil with their currencies, while the Iranians will take, say, euros or any other currency except the US dollar. So that's on the geopolitical front. For the dollar here on the daily, this is still an important support zone. We haven't really had a really strong close below this. It is very choppy. I mean, I want to see a really nice, strong red candle if we are going to be seeing some more dollar weakness. Some are already arguing that that weakness is there. If you go down on the 4-hour, you can see that we did have a red candle close, a break. So keep this in mind. We're going to look at a few dollar pairs. I think there's only two or three, and look at the dollar charts just to sort of add some confluence to those trades. So before we look at that, let's look at oil. Of course, oil is the trade that's been frustrating a lot of head and shoulder reversal type traders, similar to me. We had our break here. Again, nice uptrend. We sort of stalled here, created our first lower high type pattern, and we've been really doing nothing this past week after we had that break. So if we go down here on the 4-hour, you can see, yeah, we haven't really done anything. I mean, there's some people who are drawing trend lines and waiting for the trend line to break. But essentially what I'm looking for is if we do get a close above this swing or flip zone area here, like let's call that the $63, I'll look for potentially a long. And then on the daily, if we do continue this downtrend move, we would expect one more wave down, and that would happen if we say close below, let's call it the $61 area. So you can sort of see here, you know, I'm looking at 61, but if you're very eager, you want to take a bit more risk, maybe just look at where these candle bodies are, and if you get a close below those candle bodies, so like 61.38, that's something maybe you can look at. Gold, similar boat. We had our, well, I wouldn't really call it the best head and shoulder pattern, but you know, it's showing you this shift from a down uptrend to now potentially a downtrend, downtrend with multiple waves. So 1290 is still the zone. Excuse me here, just gonna get a sip of water. So 1290 is the zone that we're looking at for resistance. As long as that zone holds, we can potentially still see a continuation on the long term going lower. So again, there's nothing I'm doing personally. Just to let you guys know, there was a breakout earlier this week, and it got reversed quite strongly with a nice engulfing candle. So an engulfing candle is when the body of the candle engulfs or eats up the body of the previous candle. So it's a very strong psychological sign. But again, gold is actually holding up relatively well. I would think gold would have gone higher due to the US-China deal, but it hasn't. And we'll get to that actually when we talk about Bitcoin, because there's some interesting things I want to share about Bitcoin. So gold, gold really doing nothing, but I've talked about this on previous posts as well, blog post. We still potentially can make another lower high here on the way down. So that's what I'm watching for gold. I do invest in some mining shares, and I'll maybe do a talk or a post on mining. It's a very interesting industry, especially because I live here in Vancouver, which is mining is to Vancouver what technology is to San Fran. So it's really a interesting thing. And with my previous employer, I got to speak with a lot of these mining companies. I went to PDAC. I also actually have a degree in anthropology, and I studied like archaeology mostly, so a bit different than geology, but there's still some like similar interests there. Okay, so a couple of American pairs here. US Swissy, I like this on the 4-hour. Been following this for quite some time as well. Nice uptrend here. This is a flip zone that I used. I know it is quite a broad flip zone, but remember, these zones or these levels aren't one price, they're actually zones. We had a nice sort of topping pattern here, triple top, quadruple top, whatever you want to call it. A lot of wicks here telling us that there were some sellers there. And just on Friday, we did break below this zone. So I'm waiting to see if we see some follow through. Ideally, maybe wait to see a new lower low created, but this is definitely on my radar. I didn't enter this on Friday. I just don't like to enter positions on Friday. I'd rather just wait till the week to open. As you know, weekends are generally when geopolitical news happens. And when we talk about the wealth transfer, I believe it will happen also on a weekend, because that way big institutional traders and people with a large amount of money can get out of positions because they can trade generally after hours, while the middle class can't. So when the markets reopen after this wealth transfer, it'll be the middle class holding the bag. So that's maybe a topic for some other time. US yen. So again, similar sort of thing with these yen pairs. A lot of signs of potential continuation to the down for the downtrend on the long-term charts, while the shorter-term charts show some sign of potential reversal. So the US yen is a bit different because it is actually out of flip zone. That's been support and resistance, and I like how it's holding up here. Again, I think on the 2-hour it looks much nicer. Nice downtrend, and you can see here we've created a double bottom pattern, and essentially I'm waiting now for this close above just because we're close to 110, I will say 110. Let's make it a nice, good psychological number. So I'll wait for a close of 110 to see if we continue higher. So again, that's important. I look for closes because I believe once I try to add more confluence, right? Like essentially, this is a game of probabilities. So if I can have more probabilities on my side, which means I have more confluences, then the probabilities are a bit better for me, and I feel comfortable taking the trade. Nothing really here on Aussie US dollar, but I just have it noted because we are at an important support zone. Again, on the daily, this is like a lower high that I'm playing with, but really nothing that I'm liking so far. Others might disagree, but again, that's up to them. Kiwi though is something I like a bit better. 4 hour, it's not the nicest trend line. Again, I like to see nice waves. This one is a bit shallow, but it is a downtrend nonetheless. I do like this long wick. Again, this is why we don't trade breaks. We wait for candle closes, because if we saw this break here, yeah, okay, sure, you could say we could have shorted and made some money, but look where the close ended, right? So this is more of a psychological sign telling me that there are buyers down here. This is a trap pattern, so it traps a lot of traders and take them out. And we got this break here. I'm using this area because it's a flip zone, support and resistance. That's the lower high I'm using. And essentially, we did have a break. We didn't sustain it quite well. So ideally, I want to see now if we can break above these previous highs here for continuation higher. But this is a trade that I actually do have on my radar. And you could see technically we have created our first higher low here because we have a higher high. So a trade that I like and I am going to follow. Again, I'm not going to go over, if you read my blog post, I'm not going to go over too many of these yen pairs, but because they all look quite similar. If you look at the 4 hour or the 2 hour charts, you can see a nice downtrend, and you see here on the euro yen we have created a bit of a head and shoulders type pattern here. So you can read most of this stuff on my blog post, what I'm looking for, but essentially, so this is the case. Swiss yen already actually gave us the signal last week on Friday. I'm not going to take this. I mean, you could sort of see it reversing already. Well, not reversing. Wicks don't really mean anything until the subsequent candle. But essentially, again, on the shorter terms, it looks like we can see either move up, could be a retracement or a pullback, or we could see moves lower if we look at it on the daily charts, because you can see here we've had big breaks here on the daily. Generally, people are looking for perhaps a retest before we continue lower. So again, play it either way you want. Again, you know, if you are playing it on the short term, which I plan to do, you'll have zones where you want to take profits, right? So it doesn't really matter. But again, a lot of pairs look similar. Here's the Aussie yen, the Kiwi yen, so showing signs of basing on the short term, potentially for a shorter retracement or a pullback. I believe the South African rand already happened last week, and also the Turkish lira as well. So I mean, these are sort of what we're aiming for. This is sort of what we want to see. Potentially could happen. On the pound though, it's a bit of a different story here. I've been talking about this zone here that we've broken. So again, potentially see a retest before we move lower. So if we look at this actually on the 4 hour, it gives sort of a good case study on waves, because you can see on the 4 hour we've just had multiple red candles down. We haven't made our first lower high yet, so you know, very easily this can make a lower high before we go lower, right? You know, you don't want to see markets go down forever like this or go up forever. There are generally swings that we use for retracements, so this will be interesting to see what happens. But again, yeah, I will follow this. Maybe I'll just put this as a reminder. If we do make new lower lows, then we have our first lower high to play with, and I think we have some room to the downside. I mean, maybe monitor this zone here at 141, but there are maybe this zone here like at 140, let's call it, is a potential area. Okay, so there's a few euro pairs here. You can see here on the long-term daily charts, we've reached daily zones. I like this because you can see we had a large wick, so another fake out type candle telling you that there are some sellers stepping in. So again, what I'm waiting for now is we have our higher low, higher highs here, and I'm waiting for this break of this flip zone here. Let's call it the 160.20 zone. If we see a nice break, this is something I would take. Ideally though, I'd like to see more of a pattern here, potentially a head and shoulder or a double top. So again, well, there's a disclaimer at the beginning of the video, but these aren't trading recommendations. I take trades based on candles and based on breaks when I see them. So you are going to have to monitor these and make a decision when you get that break, depending on how strong you think that break is and other confluences. So this is what I'm watching. Euro New Zealand, same sort of story. Although this one can maybe inch a bit higher, but you can sort of see that there is a big wall of sellers there. But I am looking at this 170 zone. Again, I'd like to see more of a pattern though. It's just been ranging for too long. Ideally, you know, like I said, you want to see some sort of shift, which is exemplified in double tops and head and shoulders. Euro Swiss, also another interesting one. We had a nice uptrend. I wouldn't really call this, well, okay, yeah, this is a bit of a range, but this area here, this zone, is where we've been holding support for quite some time, 113.50. So if we do break below here, this is something I may consider getting into. So pound CAD is actually an example of what the next two pairs, pound Aussie and pound Kiwi, are what we hope to see. So nice uptrend. We see the shift of lower high, lower lows, and we had our break, we had a retest, and we closed much lower on Friday. So this can actually possibly continue lower, although I personally wouldn't take this trade just because I think there's some other ones that are better. Pound Aussie is what I'm looking for. If I see that break at, like, say 185.50 and a bit more choppier, but same sort of pattern. So you can read the storybook here. Higher low, higher highs. Had a nice fake out wick candle telling you that sellers are stepping in. Nice red engulfing candle. It is a bit choppy. It's not the best looking market, but I do like that close here on Friday. I am sort of worried about this zone here. Let's call it the 196.25 zone, because it's a flip zone here. But potentially this can go lower. Maybe we might see something like a bounce here, and then maybe a bit of a bounce higher before we shift lower. So that's what I'm looking for, to see if it happens. But again, expect some maybe choppiness. I do like pound Aussie a bit better. New Zealand Swiss and New Zealand CAD, maybe they're sort of getting away, but they're more daily charts trade ideas. So we did have the break here, and then after the break we had the retest, and you can see here after this week we did have a retest. So the sellers are defending this zone here. So depending on how you want to get into this, I mean, the trend, I mean, the move's already going again on the lower the 4-hour charts, or the lower time frames. You can see the swings that we're playing with here, and it's really up to you if you want to take this trade or not. So again, I like other trade ideas, so I might skip on this one, but the technicals do look good. New Zealand CAD, same sort of thing. So I've actually been talking about this pair on my blog post for quite some time. Nice uptrend, double top here, been ranging. Now we've taken out this support zone or resistance zone, sorry, support zone. And you can see we created a lower high here. We had our break, and not the strongest break. This red candle here probably would have been a better signal, because that's a strong break in my opinion. Yes, it was bought up again, but you can see here that the bears have stepped right back in, and have actually closed below the previous days, well, the whole previous week's candle bodies. So that's quite a bearish sign. So I do like New Zealand CAD for a potential daily idea. Last but not least, let's talk about Bitcoin. So if you follow my charts on Bitcoin, we spoke about this zone, 4,000, quite some time back now, actually. Well, 4,250, because this was the downtrend, and we thought we created a first higher low here. This trend has been moving, and we had a nice pop here. The biggest flip zone is actually here at, like, say, the 10,000 level, but this zone here at, say, like 8,400 warrants our attention as well. But again, this break here of this flip zone at, say, 5,900, very important in my opinion. So it'll be interesting to see what cryptos do. So now on my take on this move, if you listen to Kyle Bass, and you can listen to him on the Hedge Eye YouTube channel, and other, well, he has a whole bunch of YouTube videos, but he actually talks about how Bitcoin is actually used by Chinese communist members for basically shifting money whenever there's a devaluation of the yuan in order to save their purchase power. So what they'll do is they'll exchange their yuan to Bitcoin, and then once the devaluation of the yuan is complete, they'll shift back and make a bit more money on the way. So I find it interesting that gold didn't go up when it's sort of seen as this this risk hedge when this whole US-China trade deal happened. However, Bitcoin did go up when the US-China trade talks did happen, and it just, in my opinion, I might be wrong, but it puts a bit more I can sort of see Kyle Bass's theory being in play here, and I can sort of see why Chinese members or party members would do such a thing, because the yuan, I'm quite sure, did take quite a good hit well, during this time. So again, for this week ahead, I'll let the market digest some of this news about the US-China trade deal. If you read my blog post, I mean, just incredible things we're seeing, where Steve Mnuchin said that deal is constructive, and then there's no more talk scheduled, and the markets just ate it up and bounced up higher. But again, if you read my theory on my ideas on monetary policy, I believe these markets have to go higher, because if they do go lower, there is a crisis that can happen. That will happen, and essentially we are now in managed markets. So I hope you enjoyed this. This is the first time I did this weekly analysis, and I'm going to strive to do it every week. And again, it's just more that you can sort of see the type of charts that I look for and how to trade them. Just the whole idea of exposing yourself to more charts is a good idea in my opinion, and I'll see you next week.